What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the 11-game slate for Week 6 of the NFL season. We're going to look at some top plays and lineup advice for NFL DFS contests on DraftKings and FanDuel throughout the rest of this video. Definitely appreciate you all tuning in as always. I like to start with my favorite play and then go into the favored running backs on each slate as a way to think about positive game scripts to anticipate that are coming up. But my favorite play this week is going to be Jordan Addison at wide receiver. Unfortunately, I'm not alone here. We're projecting Addison to be the number one highest owned player in DFS this weekend. But with Justin Jefferson being placed on injured reserve, it leaves a gaping hole in the opportunity for a very pass-heavy offense from the Minnesota Vikings in their matchup with the Chicago Bears here. And all indications are, despite the questionable tag you see on the screen here on Thursday afternoon, which is when I'm recording this video, all indications are Addison is going to be the wide receiver that is going to lead the Vikings in opportunities without Justin Jefferson available. So significantly underpriced at just $5,700 here on DraftKings and $6,700 over on FanDuel. More on receivers that we should play in our lineups this week a little later on. First, let's talk about the biggest favorites on this slate. The Miami Dolphins are the number one favorite on this slate. They are favored by 13.5 points as of right now. And unfortunately, Devon Chan has been placed on injured reserve, going to miss the next 4 games minimum. Jeff Wilson may be activated, but still on injured reserve here late in the week, so we can't rely on him necessarily. It is going to be Raheem Mostert leading the way once again for the Dolphins as a 13.5 point favorite. The Dolphins come into this game with the best run blocking offensive line in the league, facing the worst rushing defense in the league of the Carolina Panthers at home. You can't dream up a better spot to put a running back into the vast majority of your high-risk lineups and into your low-risk lineup this week than the spot that you have for Raheem Mostert. So there are concerns. There are other running backs on the roster that could contribute this week. Chris Brooks has had some looks on special teams. He could play a little bit more this week. Jeff Wilson, who I just talked about, could be activated and could have some opportunities. But what we're expecting is Raheem Mostert to have that role that we saw him have for the first few weeks of the season before Achane came on strong. He'll go right back into that role here and be the number one running back we think you want in low-risk contests this week. So Raheem Mostert from the Dolphins, favored by 13.5 points. No surprise, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. Niners are favored by 7.5 points here. Now they're on the road playing the Browns off the bye week. Browns defense is one of the toughest defenses in the league thus far. They're actually the third best rush defense in the NFL, somewhat average against running backs in the passing game, but this is an above average player in Christian McCaffrey. So we're always going to be fairly high on him. It actually does look like, as of right now, his ownership is in the low teens in our projection model at Occupy Fantasy at the running back position. We have McCaffrey a little lower in our rankings, 3, 5, 7, 9th overall, but projecting for just 12% ownership on DraftKings, 13% ownership on FanDuel. If this holds by Sunday, this is one of the lowest owned spots you're going to get for maybe the best running back in the NFL today. So Christian McCaffrey, not necessarily someone everyone's looking to play in low-risk contests this week because of the salary cost, but in a great spot on the road as a big favorite to help San Francisco realize their expected point total here. Just not sure we want to use him in low risk. Good high risk running back here in week number 6. The next biggest favorite on the board, the Los Angeles Rams, favored by 7 points. Kyren Williams, negative game script last week against the Eagles. The Rams lost that game, so we did not see many targets, just 13 rushing attempts, but still played a ton of snaps, still dominated the opportunity at the position. Now is going to be at home in a positive game script against the Arizona Cardinals. So Kyren Williams is worth considering in low-risk contests. DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles on the road against the New York Jets, favored by 7 points. Good spot for Swift here in low risk. At $6,100, it's hard to argue with Swift's price. So I do think in low-risk contests, this is probably the most popular trio of running backs that you will see. There's 2 things that I'm most interested in outside of this group. Projected ownership does seem to suggest that Raiders running back Josh Jacobs could be up there as well. Jacobs is a little bit more expensive than each of Mostert and Kyren, but at $7,000 against the Patriots, who have been absolutely ineffective at moving the ball on offense, there could be a lot of opportunities for the Raiders to control the ball, run a lot of offensive plays, and a lot of those may turn into handoffs late to Josh Jacobs. In our model, Jacobs 7,000 on DraftKings, 8,000 on FanDuel versus Swift 6,100, 7,200. So Jacobs going to be a little lower owned than Swift's, especially right around the same ownership on DraftKings anyway as Mostert, but a little bit more expensive to roster. Situation's flipped on FanDuel where Mostert's more expensive. So player I did not talk about yet at the running back position, Breece Hall exploded last week for the New York Jets. We finally saw Breece Hall overtake Dalvin Cook in this backfield. Breece Hall on the other side of this matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are the toughest rush defense thus far on the season for running backs to play against. So Breece does have that resistance going against him. 7-point underdog at home. And even though Hall has not been super involved in the passing game, it's good to know that the Eagles are also above average defending running backs in the passing game. So Breece Hall, tough sledding this week, I think, against the Eagles defense, but going to be played pretty heavily by the field potentially, with his price still being somewhat lower than it probably should be after what we saw in week number 5, which was the complete Breece Hall takeover of this backfield. Dalvin Cook rendered somewhat irrelevant against Denver in week number 5. Biggest favorites on the board have pretty high correlation with the highest team totals on the board. The Miami Dolphins have a 30.5 point team total, so I definitely think stacking Tua Tagovailoa with Tyreek Hill is in play here. It may be a little difficult to do this with the running backs that I just talked about, so I will come back to how to get that done when I go through some of my favorite stacks in a couple of minutes. Tua isn't being played in low-risk contests this week, but he is our highest ranked quarterback in the model, so I think he's very good for tournament play. In low-risk contest, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, and Matthew Stafford. These quarterbacks are all in the mid $6,000 to mid $7,000 range on DraftKings and FanDuel, and they just make your lineups fit a lot better in low-risk contests. We're not as worried about stacking in low-risk contests. We're just trying to get the most floor that we can with a lineup. Burrow with the Bengals. Matthew Stafford is my favorite one in this group in his matchup with the Arizona Cardinals. This helps you get where you need to go in low-risk contests at the quarterback position. And looking at our straight model rankings, Stafford being number 2 in the model behind Tua Tagovailoa, I think that makes him the best low-risk play here. In week number 6, Stafford is going to be facing the least amount of opposing pressure from an opposing defense this week. That's a big reason why we're pretty high on Matthew Stafford this week overall. Wide receivers. Already gave you the cash wide receiver of the week, Jordan Addison. The other wide receivers that are going to be super popular in low-risk contests this week, sorted by projected ownership. Marquise Brown on DraftKings of the Arizona Cardinals, just $5,300, actually is featured on our underperforming wide receiver list this week as well. And nice correlation with Kyren Williams and Matthew Stafford. So I think getting him in here definitely makes a ton of sense. Don't worry about these questionable tags. Addison and Marquise Brown have both practiced as of Thursday. They're on track to play, so they're definitely fine to use in low-risk contests if they do end up suiting up on Sundays. That's exactly what we expect to happen here. Now, you can see here with $46.33 per player remaining for a low-risk lineup, salary's starting to get a little tight. So the way to make that work is with the defense. Here on DraftKings, the Lions are going to be the most popular play against Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming off their bye. So I think you can just kind of go with them here, and that gets you up to $5,600 per. You're playing a cheaper tight end, you'll get to a pretty good wide receiver. The other defense that's going to be popular here on DraftKings, the Houston Texans, and the Miami Dolphins at just $3,500 against Carolina, also going to see a healthy dose of ownership here in week number 6. Over on FanDuel, going back to the model, I do think the best play, for low risk anyway, is Houston at just $3,700. By far the most popular defense on the FanDuel slate because of how affordable they're going to be this week. But at $5,600 per player remaining, Calvin Ridley is the next highest owned wide receiver that we expect to see on Sunday on DraftKings and FanDuel. 18% here on DraftKings, 22% over on FanDuel. So you can take Calvin and get him in here. You have $4,500 for your tight ends. And one of the most popular tight ends this week is going to be Dallas Goedert. We can't really get to him in this particular build the way that I've done it. But Dallas Goedert will be an option. Kyle Pitts, Zach Ertz, both right around this $3,400, $3,600 range on DraftKings. They're going to be pretty popular this week. Kyle Pitts is going to be the next most popular tight end that the field considers behind Dallas Goedert. We get 11 targets in a game, and all of a sudden the field is ready to get hurt by Kyle Pitts again. But I think Just think of this more as the right price range for a tight end that we want to see in a low-risk contest. The ownership is on the side of a player like Kyle Pitts, and that allows us to fit in everything that we want in low risk here. Some salary remaining, so we could look to upgrade somewhere else in here, maybe at wide receiver, running back, or quarterback, or at tight end if we like one of these $4,500 players or less. But that's where low risk is going to be this week, guys. This is the core that everyone is looking at for low risk players specifically. Our model at tight end and high risk does like TJ Hawkinson and Sam Laporta once again. These are probably going to be the highest upside tight ends. So TJ Hawkinson, number 1 on DraftKings. Sam Laporta, number 2 here on DraftKings. And same for FanDuel. So those guys are somewhat lower owned options to consider on DraftKings. Hawkinson going to be a little bit more popular on FanDuel this week. High risk contests, my favorite thing to talk about week in and week out. There is a way to make the high upside Miami stack work. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Tua Tagovailoa. I'm talking about Tyreek Hill. This is the 2-0. Right? Week in and week out, Tyreek Hill is the main weapon for the Miami Dolphins. Yes, Jalen Waddle is going to see targets as well. 10 targets last week. You can certainly go the Waddle over Hill route and be differentiated that way. We can play Mostert because we're probably going to see a healthy dose of running in this game from this offense. This offense has been an efficiency machine both through the air and on the ground, and I wouldn't start betting against them now with a matchup here against Carolina as 13.5 point favorites. But the number one way to fit some of these high upside plays is actually something that correlates with the chalk wide receiver Jordan Addison, and I think this ends up being a little bit more popular come Sunday morning than it is right now. Khalil Herbert, doubtful. He's not going to play this week. He's got an ankle injury that's going to be holding him out for multiple weeks. That's been confirmed by beat writers, so you can already rule him out. Rashawn Johnson has a concussion, and he has not practiced 2 days in a row here this week officially, Wednesday or Thursday. That's going to set up Dante Foreman, who has been inactive for a couple of weeks, to lead the way for the Bears backfield in carries. Underdog running back, but he is at home and should see a majority of the touches at a really juicy salary of $4,400. So of all the punts that are available to consider this week in DFS, I think Foreman at $4,400 here is a good high-risk play to get some of these higher-priced stacks to work. So I'll throw him in here. We got $4,150 per player remaining. Some of the plays that I already talked about that will be popular, we can use since we have some pivots in here already. $46.33 per player remaining. Can look at one of the popular tight ends as well, like a Kyle Pitts that people are going to play. And we have $5,200 per player remaining here in our lineup. Not only is Marquise Brown going to be a good low-risk play, I cannot emphasize this enough as the season marches on. I'm probably going to sound like a broken record week in and week out. Underperforming wide receivers haven't necessarily seen their production match the opportunities that they've had in the passing game. We see here Marquise Brown has had 10 plus targets in 3 of the last 4 weeks. He does have 3 touchdowns in the 4 weeks of play. But the amount of targets, the amount of opportunities that he has seen, he's still not hitting his true expected fantasy point ceiling. So Marquise Brown is an underperforming wide receiver for us this week. I think he's really good to play in this type of build. $5,100 left per player remaining. I definitely think there's ways to finish this off with another underperforming wide receiver, maybe a running back that's pretty cheap. This is how I'm probably going to approach building my lineups this week, is looking at cheap running back like Foreman, some underperforming wide receivers to fill out the rest of the high-risk lineup. Miami is my favorite stack this week. I think this is a week where there's a lot of one-sided stacks that we look at. These pieces seem to be popular in low risk, so I will say I like the Rams side. It does kind of turn into a game stack with a bring back because of the Marquise Brown underperforming wide receiver spot, because we also do have a cheap running back here as well in Imari DiMercado that everyone is expecting to start this week with James Conner on injured reserve. He's $500 more than Foreman. That's why I'm less interested. But in the context of a game stack of the Cardinals and the Rams, could potentially fit and make things work. Stafford, going to be popular in low-risk contests. Kyron Williams, going to be popular in low-risk contests. Kupp and Nakua still priced up pretty aggressively. $9,000 for Cooper Kupp. $8,000 for Puka Nakua. We saw both have double-digit targets last week, so we already know there is room for both of these guys to operate in this offense. Kupp with 12 targets, Nakua with 11. I wouldn't expect to see anything different here. Tutu Atwell is still on our underperforming wide receiver list. Saw the production dip. 5 targets after having 9 targets in 3 straight games. Tutu still has a decent amount of opportunity. Could be an interesting way to get different in high risk this week if you do stack the Los Angeles Rams here. But once again, Marquise Brown, and then let's go with Kupp. And you got 5150 to finish up the lineup here. You can make a stack like this work. From a game perspective, there's only one game where I like both sides to stack this week. Miami and the Rams are 2 of my favorite stacks. Seattle and Cincinnati. So this is the only show probably where we're going to tell you we're interested in a 44-point total game that's going to be played in less than ideal conditions. But I like the ceiling of the Cincinnati offense. We saw Joe Burrow get a little bit closer to where we want him to be. Pretty easy to use Kenneth Walker III as a bringback in the running game. Obviously, we have access to Tyler Lockett. It's going to be pretty popular in low-risk contests behind the big 3 I talked about earlier. DK Metcalf playing through a rib injury, but also going to be an option here. Seattle wide receiver is pretty cheap. Seattle running back pretty cheap. And then Burrow, Chase, and a third like Boyd. Trenton Irwin, who was really involved last week. Irwin had 10 targets, and he's still just $3,300 here. There are ways to double stack Cincinnati with Seattle and some of the popular plays that I talked about throughout this video. There are definitely ways for this to be really interesting, even though the total is kind of middling in betting markets. But those are my favorite high-risk plays this week. Miami Dolphins is a stack. Los Angeles Rams is a stack. Seattle Cincinnati as a game stack. Keep an eye out for the daily plug, which will be posted by Friday evening at occupyfantasy.com. I'll go through all of my favorite low and high-risk plays on the slate, and I'll give you all of my favorite stacking options that you can consider as well. Good luck in week number 6 of the NFL season. We will have a daily plug for Sunday Night Football between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Giants. It'll be available by midday on Sunday on the website. And on Monday, we will have another video on this channel to talk about Monday Night Football between the Dallas Cowboys and the Los Angeles Chargers. There will also be a daily plug posted about that for you to consider as well. Really appreciate your time watching this video. If you could give us a thumbs up on the video, we'd really appreciate that. If you could subscribe to the channel, we would still see, even though there's been an improvement with Brian pushing you guys in the number of subscribers, our subscriber to non-subscriber ratio is still pretty high. So being subscribed is how you get notified when we schedule a live video, when we upload another video about NFL. NBA starting very, very soon. We're going to have a lot of videos on this channel for those of you that want to grind NBA DFS. You're going to want to make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you get notified when all of this great content is available for you here in 2023. Good luck in week number 6, guys. I will be back next week to talk to you about week number 7 of the NFL season.